Hey, it's Brent. Hope you're doing well. Wanted to take some time to explain to anyone out there that might be a first-time home buyer and maybe even just thinking about wanting to buy a home someday. Wanted to walk you through what we've identified as kind of 11 different steps involved in that process, all the way from the first maybe thought of buying a home, all the way until that first payment and when you're in the repayment of your mortgage, what that looks like. There's about 11 different steps involved with that, and just thought I'd take a few minutes to break down everything from start to finish and hopefully help alleviate any anxiety that you might feel, overwhelm, or just the unknown of what to expect as you go about searching out for your first home. So we're going to jump right in. Step number one is more or less kind of the pre-planning stage or the first phase of buying. And that's really getting in touch with what you want things to look like when you do buy a home. So determining a budget, like a monthly payment, if you have any cash to make as a down payment, or if you want to finance the full amount. Also looking at things like your credit reports to make sure that your credit score is maximized and you're in a good situation to not only get pre-qualified, but to get the best terms on your mortgage for the overall lowest monthly payment and lowest interest rate and things like that. So a couple of things on the pre-planning stage. If you have any credit cards that you're currently paying on, you're going to want to have those paid down as far as you can to elevate that credit score. So if you've got, let's say, $1,000 credit line or credit limit and you owe $950 on that, that's typically going to hit your credit score quite hard. If you get that paid down to, say, a couple $100s, you'll typically see those credit scores increase quite a bit. So that's probably the biggest, easiest tip to help with your credit score. If you have any outstanding judgments or collections or anything out there that you want paid off, now would be a good time to address that even before you've talked to a mortgage lender or a realtor or anything, just getting yourself in a good position to be able to purchase in the near future. So down payment's another one. A lot of programs, especially for first-time homebuyers, have what's called down payment assistance, specifically here in South Dakota where we're located. Some great programs to help with that. So you may not necessarily need a down payment. You may not need necessarily any cash for the closing, but the more you have for a down payment, obviously the lesser your mortgage will be for a monthly payment. So one of those things to have as much cash saved as you can, but you don't typically or not always going to need it necessarily. So, and then the last one would be your monthly budget. We see this quite often where your monthly rent is, say, $1,000, and maybe you want to go up to $1,500 a month on a mortgage or $2,000. Knowing that you're going to really be able to budget for it, not only just qualify for the mortgage, but that you're going to still be comfortable when you do get into that home, just to be able to, to continue to live, enjoy the weekends, that type of thing. Setting a budget, the best way to do that is when you start thinking about buying a home, maybe just assume like right away, my mortgage is now $2,000 a month. Am I able to make that payment every month? And just put that money into savings. And whatever your rent is, if it's half of that, then you should be able to start accumulating some cash for that down payment that may or may not be required. So a little bit of a trick there just to see if budget is going to be comfortable at that new amount or if you maybe need to adjust some expectations there. So that is all for the pre-planning stage, kind of step number one. Step number two would be to actually reach out to a lender, mortgage loan officer, and talk to them about getting pre-qualified and get your application in. So typically nowadays, you can fill out an application right online. Takes probably 10 to 15 minutes, maybe a little bit longer if you've got a little bit more complex situation. But you can do that all typically from the comfort of your home, and you can just fill out all your information there. If there's going to be anyone else on the mortgage, you might need to know like their social security number, their address, years of employment, things that you would, for the most part, know about yourself. But if there's two people on that application, both would typically fill that application out together. So like I said, probably 10 to 15, maybe 20 minutes to fill that out. From there, that goes to your loan officer. They get your application information. They'll usually look through it all, make sure you're employed and income and assets and everything lines up with what's expected. And then they will pull a copy typically of your credit report and look at not only your credit scores, but any debts that you might have, monthly payments, lining that all up with your income just to make sure that what you've planned for on your budget in step one actually makes sense on paper for that actual pre-qualification process. So typically after your loan officers reviewed that application, they'll reach out usually within anywhere from a few minutes to a few hours to I'd say a day at most to set up a time to just go over your application and answer any questions that you might have, nail down what you're looking at for a monthly payment, what that would look like, any cash that you might need, clarification type items on income or employment, how long you've lived at your home, that type of thing. So that whole pre-qualification process, super important, but once you've filled out that application, it kind of puts it in the lender's court to do some due diligence on their end and make sure that you'll qualify. Once they've connected all the dots and usually visited with you for a while, probably 30 minutes or so, either on a Zoom call online or an in-person meeting, typically is very, very helpful. And the reason for that is you can get answers to all your questions. You can feel really good about where you're at on your budget, feel good about the lender you're working with, and just kind of get all on the same page and have some confidence in what you're doing with purchasing. So highly recommend that. Connect with your lender, get 30 minutes on their calendar, come in or do that virtually just to make sure you're on the same page. But after you've done that, you'll get what's called a pre-qualification letter, and that will basically just spell out to anyone that is working with you, like a realtor or a seller of a home or their agent, that you're pre-qualified, that we've looked at your credit report, your income, your assets. We've walked through all the programs. That you're good to go on the mortgage once you find that house. So that's a very, very important piece of documentation. Your seller of the home that you buy is going to want to make sure that that you are qualified, that you're not just putting in an offer and have no way to follow through on the financing or purchasing that. So very important piece of documentation. That all happens in step two, which is the application process. Step three is connecting with a real estate agent, a local realtor is recommended. And I can't stress this one highly enough. Working with a seller for sale by owner can have some significant things to watch for, to put it mildly, or some potential pitfalls on like how the home was priced, watching out for your best interests, making sure that everything goes smoothly, and then if there is any sort of conflict, having yourself represented. So highly, highly, highly recommend that you work with a local real estate agent or realtor. If you need help with identifying someone to work with you, we obviously work with quite a few ourselves and be happy to help you go through that process as well. And a realtor is really going to be able to help you with a lot of different things. They're going to know about properties that are maybe about to come on the market or just hit the market. They're going to know what to look for when going through a home. Sometimes cosmetically it looks great, but there's certain things with foundation issues or a roof or just certain things that you might not think about as a first-time buyer. And a good realtor knows what to look for and will help you identify those things and even negotiate with the seller if some of that needs to be addressed. So they'll also want to know your budget, your wants, your needs, the area that you're looking for, and then their job is to basically help you find that home and get to a point where you're able to negotiate with the seller. So that I would call step number 3, which is reaching out to a real estate agent or realtor. Step number 4 would be like the offer stage of a purchase. And this is you're pre-qualified, you're working with a realtor, maybe you've looked at a few homes and the perfect home comes for sale and you want to put in an offer. So what you do there, the realtor that you're working with will help you fill out a form called a purchase contract or purchase agreement. You fill out basically your offer of what you're offering the seller to purchase their home for, the amount of money, the date of the closing, if you want them to help with anything outside of the norms, things like your earnest money, which is basically just putting money down as like a deposit that you're then credited back at your closing. It basically tells the seller that you're very interested in purchasing the home, and not only am I interested and I'm filling out this offer, but here's $1,000, $500, $5,000, whatever that number is. that I'm putting down as a deposit, and this just shows that I'm serious about purchasing. So the real estate agent will help you with that. They'll fill out your offer. They'll talk or communicate with the seller or their agent, and the seller might come back and say, "Sounds great. We got a deal. We're good to go." Or they might come back and counter offer at a certain different price, or even reject that offer altogether. So a lot of different variables that can happen there. I'm not a realtor myself, don't claim to be. I would seek counsel from them and take a lot of their advice on how to kind of walk through and navigate a purchase contract. So that's the offer stage. That's basically where the lender's out of the mix there. It's between the realtor and the seller, buyer, and the other agent. But we also will help with giving like what the payments would be if you counter offer at a different number, or if the closing needs to go quickly, can we as a lender help accommodate that? So we all work as a team in an ideal scenario. And yeah, you just want to get with a really good real estate agent, one that you're comfortable with, and someone that has a good reputation. So can't highly stress that one enough. And that would be kind of filling out step 4, which is that offer stage where you're putting in your offer, you are putting in a closing date, your amount that you're willing to pay, and that type of thing. So moving on to step number 5, this is one of the exciting ones. This is when the seller has said, yes, we agree, it's an accepted offer, or they've countered back and you've accepted their counter offer, and it's a go, meaning we are purchasing this home, we are setting our closing date for 45 days from now or 30 days from now or whatever that number of days out is, and we're moving forward with purchasing this home. So typically as a buyer, that's when you can start to get excited about it, because you've won out on that property, and you've got a closing date that you've circled on your calendar and you're planning for. This is also where things like a home inspection typically will happen. Another very good idea to have the home inspected to make sure that everything's what you would expect when you're purchasing, that there's no hidden issues that might come up when you move in, and something maybe even your realtor didn't know about or you didn't know about. A qualified home inspector for the few $100s that they charge, well worth the investment and peace of mind. There's also things like an appraisal that are done on the home, and that is separate from an inspection. That is someone that's hired by the lender to go out and make sure that the home is worth what you're paying for it, or if not, you know exactly what that home is worth based on what other homes that are similar to that have sold for recently. So they will look at comparable sales of similar sized homes in the same area, typically 3 to 5 other homes similar to the one you're buying, adjust for things like square footage, number of bedrooms, location, condition of the home, all of that. They're trying to make it where it's basically identical to yours, and then you can compare what those have sold for, what yours is selling for, and make sure that you're paying kind of a fair price for the home, or if you're paying more than what it appraised for, at least you know what it's worth based on previous sales that have recently happened. So there are instances where you don't need an appraisal. Varies depending on the lender and the loan program and things, but for the most part, that appraisal is done and gives a lot of peace of mind to what you're buying as well. There's also things like title insurance, title work, and a survey that are done behind the scenes. Don't really need to know a lot about those. The lender will take care of that, ordering that on your behalf. But that will identify things like other liens or judgments or things that are on either you as a buyer or the property and the sellers. So assuming that all checks out fine, the survey will show like the boundaries of the property to make sure there is no encroachments from the neighbors, like fences and landscaping or a garage, things like that we've seen over the years. You just want to make sure that you know that the property you're buying, your stuff is on your property, theirs is on theirs, that type of thing. So that's all done behind the scenes. Really not a lot you have to worry about. I know it sounds like a lot, but it's a lot of people just doing their jobs to make sure that the house you're buying is what you expect, and you're made aware of things if not. This is also the time where your loan goes to the underwriter. So when you backed up to step number 2, that was getting pre-qualified. When your offer was accepted here in step 5, that's actually where the underwriter reviews all your documentation, maybe an updated pay stub, maybe it's been a few months since you were pre-qualified. They review everything again and give what's called a conditional loan approval, meaning they've signed off on it, that your income is what you said it was, your assets are. They've reviewed the appraisal, that any inspections that might have been needed, the title insurance, the survey. They review all of that and basically sign off that everything was reviewed and acceptable for the loan that you're looking at. So a lot done there, but a lot of that's done behind the scenes. You've done most of the work already at this point as a buyer, and that just happens without you, for the most part, even knowing what's going on from day to day. So from the time your offer was accepted until the final approval, this could be anywhere from a week to maybe a few weeks. You typically will want that final approval from the underwriter, ideally like at least a week before your closing date. That eliminates any last minute stress or worrying about things, potential like postponements of closing dates, all of that type of thing. And this final approval in step number 6 here is just the underwriter signing off on absolutely everything. So they might have needed a more recent pay stub from you, another bank statement, some documentation on what a credit inquiry was, or why you moved some money around in different accounts. All that's very, very normal, but that all happens on every loan before the loan underwriter will sign off on that final approval. And that's just them following the guidelines set by the program. So again, very normal. Just kind of expect that going in. It makes for a very smooth, easy process when you know kind of behind the scenes of how that works. So moving on, step number 7, getting very close to the closing date. Step number 7 is the closing disclosure. So this is, best way to think of it is you were given all your numbers up front when you purchased your home. You've probably locked in your interest rates. You knew roughly what to expect for a monthly payment and what to expect for any cash that you might need for closing. And this disclosure basically just affirms those numbers up and tells you exactly what you're looking at for those numbers. So that is needed to be given to you as a buyer to follow guidelines on compliance at least 3 days before your closing date. So 3 days prior to your closing date, you should have those firm numbers. They might still tweak a few things, but you should have at least an initial closing disclosure that's somewhat accurate for your final numbers. If you have questions on those, that would be a good time to ask your loan officer as well, and get that closing disclosure lined up. You can start planning for things like if you need a cashier's check or you need to wire some money for your closing. You'll have an idea what that is, and can ask any questions at that point. So getting close here. Step number 8 is typically what's done, and not always, but most times, a final walkthrough on your property. So typically it would be you and your real estate agent, like usually the day of or day before closing, somewhere in the vicinity of the closing. You're just going to look through the property one more time and make sure that everything is what you expect before you sign on the dotted line with the closing. So this would be things like if the seller was supposed to remove something from the property or make a repair or fix something, that's all done and everybody kind of did what they were supposed to, and the home is ready for you to take over as a buyer. So hopefully it's uneventful, just one last time to be excited for the most part, but you want to make sure the property is in satisfactory condition. So the last 3, these are exciting. The closing. This is where your final numbers are firmed up. Your final loan paperwork is all sent to the title company, and typically you'll be there, whoever's on the loan or any spouses involved, the buyer's agent, seller's agent, the sellers, the title company, the loan officer, really just a time to celebrate. Probably takes about 30 minutes or so to do the closing. Some of it's electronically signed, some of it's wet signed, but basically just a time to celebrate and to sign all the paperwork and make everything official. So at that point, everything's approved and you're ready to go. So congratulations, you've just bought a home, which is exciting, maybe a little bit scary. Step number 10, don't help much with this one, but it's just moving into the property. So you move into the home and you are good to go. It's your home. You can do with it what you want. Congratulations. You just have to start making payments, typically that following month. So brings us to step 11, which is the last one, and that is just your first Mortgage payment typically will be due the first of the month, at least 30 days after your closing. So if you close on the 15th of the month, it's about 45 days out. You close on the 5th of the month, it is probably about 55 days out. Close on the last day of the month, it's about 30 days out. So again, congratulations, you've bought a home. You're starting to make your payments. You are good to go. You'll get a welcome packet in the mail. You can typically set up automatic payments and then reach out to your loan officer if you have any questions from there. So if you have any questions at all, reach out to myself or our team. We'd love to walk you through that and help you get in a home of your own. Thank you.